On this episode of Still Loading, they'll podcast anything these days. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today it is the long awaited return of my kind of informal James Bond series that I've started so many years ago. I've covered a bunch of the James Bond games. I have the Still Bonding bonus episodes over on Patreon. But there's still so many more Bond games to talk about. And with me today is a guest who I've had on the show before. It is the British Bond addict himself, aka Chris. Chris, how are you doing today?
Hey, good evening. Not too bad, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on the show again. Last time you were on, we played Goldfinger. Goldfinger.
No.
Oh, we don't get copyright strikes. You actually, you know what's a funny story? Just thinking of Goldfinger. Apparently, in a later Bond film, they sampled like the trumpet sting or like one of the musical stings from Goldfinger in a later Bond like song, and then they got sued for it. They got sued by themselves, or something like that. I forget which one. Do you know what I'm? You know what I'm talking about?
I think it might have been one of the songs where it hadn't been yet contested as an overall Bond song, but it's kind of in the audition phase. I think that's what that sounds like. There's one which was very interesting. You Only Live Twice has a very distinctive and that was ripped off quite shamelessly by a British artist called Robbie Williams for the song Millennium. And they were going to sue, but then it drove up interest in the original song and raised more money. So they're like, oh, it's okay, you can keep doing it.
But they have no right to sue because they ripped off an original Bond song for it. Like, not ripped off, but they sampled "You Only Live Twice."
It's a strange old world out there.
It is a strange world out there. But I'm having you on tonight to talk about the PlayStation 1 classic, Tomorrow Never Dies, based off of the second Brosnan movie, Brosnan's second outing as James Bond, Tomorrow Never Dies. The movie came out, if I remember correctly, in 97, and the game came out in 99.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So 97. So once again, a little 2-year development cycle, kind of like what happened with GoldenEye, because GoldenEye came out in 95, and I believe the game came out in 97, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's just, I'm actually kind of amazed. I remember that because for once, it's not up in front of me. That was all off the dome right there.
There you go. One of us.
Oh, dude, it's so funny how other than video games, I would argue James Bond is the only thing I could even declare myself mildly an expert on. Not saying I am an expert, but like I know more than I probably need to.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that's not a bad thing. I think one thing that I found interesting with Tomorrow Never Dies for the 2-year cycle is that originally the game was meant to be a continuation game, and you're meant to be fighting against Satoru Ishiguro, and it's meant to be its own story, and it didn't test that well. So they kind of ran back and went, oh, we'll make the film of the game, I promise. And I think that's what led to it being a 2-year gap. There's even an advert with Desmond Llewellyn, who plays Q, actually talking about what the film was going to be and the fact it was going to be a continuation. So that's a little fun something to delve into.
Oh, Desmond Llewellyn. God, I would have loved to see him be Q longer. I don't care that he was old as dirt already in Tomorrow Never, or The World Is Not Enough, excuse me. I would have loved to see him in Brosnan's last outing. But anyway, we are here to talk Tomorrow Never Dies. And before we get into the game, we are going to and we're going to talk a little bit about the movie, of course, because it's it's what the game is based off of. I want to hear from you first about some of your personal experiences, or I guess us. We're going to talk about some of our personal experiences. And I was telling you off mic, we're going to start with me just so because mine's a little more anticlimactic. So here we go. My memories with this is I remember seeing that they came out with this game. So hold on, let me backtrack here. So my journey into Bond, my first Bond movie was The World Is Not Enough. And I saw that on a VHS tape that my dad taped off of like TV. It was one of those ones where we got a free free trial of one of those uh crazy expensive cable channels, like I think it was Showtime, HBO, Showtime, things like that. It was Showtime, and they had the full movie on, and this must have been in like early 2000s, 2000, because it had happened before uh the last Die Another Day came out, so it had to be in between 2000 and 2001, and it was the full movie, and he taped it onto the VHS. So I watched that so many times. I got obsessed with James Bond from The World's Not Enough. And then I remember renting James Bond VHSs from my local library, and my mom got me You Only Live Twice, and I was very disappointed because I'm like, this isn't Pierce Brosnan. I had no idea Bond was that old of a franchise at the time, so it went right over my head. I'm like, who is this? I didn't understand it was Sean Connery. I hated it. I was like, this is old. Why would you? This isn't James Bond. Where's James Bond? I learned a lot more later, obviously, but and so because of that, though, it sent me down the rabbit hole. And there was this fucking cool trailer that it was like the world of James Bond, and had some of the action highlights from all of the different Bonds up into, like, it had like Roger Moore or his stunt double sliding down a handrail. It was from Octopussy. He's sliding down the handrail and he shoots off the little like knob at the bottom, so that way his balls don't explode on the bottom. Uh, and it had all these amazing highlights. And I remember seeing a bunch of Brosnan's ones. I'm like, what are those? Like, and it mentioned GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies. So then I ended up watching both of them later on, and got obsessed with Tomorrow Never Dies, loved that game, or loved that movie. Then got, GoldenEye, played The World Is Not Enough. And then I was like, that's interesting that they skipped Tomorrow Never Dies. Is there a Tomorrow Never Dies game? And then I found the PlayStation one, and it's a third person game, which is very different. I was expecting an FPS game like the other two, but I wasn't disappointed with the first couple missions. And I only played it a little bit, didn't really, I was very confused by it. It was, I wasn't used to the controls, and so I only rented it, if I remember correctly. So I didn't even really get much of a chance to play it. And that's all my experience with this game. Like, that's my memories of it are more my build up into Bond, but this game sits right in that time frame of my early Bond fandom of, discovering Pierce Brosnan, discovering the Bond franchise as a whole, and kind of learning all about it and getting obsessed with the games and everything. So even though this game doesn't have a strong impact on me, it still ties in with my formative years as a young Bond fan. So that's my connection to this game. But Chris, what about you? What is your connection with this game? And you said this is one of your favorites. So I'm excited to hear what you got.
Well, it's weird. Bond. Everyone says they remember their first Bond film. I've always had the Bond films on in the background because of my dad, so I've always been used to Bond. And way back in the day, the first game I ever played was Sonic the Hedgehog, which my godfather owned. And then one day, my next door neighbors were going on holiday, and for 2 weeks they lent us their N64. That's my memory. I can remember my cul-de-sac very well. And they lent us their N64, and on that we had Banjo-Kazooie, Super Mario 64, Mario Kart, and GoldenEye. And that was the first time I actually got proper gaming in. I must have only been about 6 or 7 at the time. And of those games, I became obsessed with GoldenEye. I absolutely loved it. But then after 2 weeks, the N64 got taken away. And my parents were thinking, well, they loved it so much, we should get them a games console. And after loving the N64 so much, they bought us the PS1, which I have no real idea how that logic came about. So we got that. And for the longest time, I was looking for a James Bond game. The closest I got earlier was Tomb Raider, Tomb Raider 2, which was the first one I had, which I loved. And I was of the age where I was like, I want a James Bond game, but we weren't getting magazines that frequently. I didn't see stuff all too much, so I didn't really know there were Bond games out there. and we went to a Blockbuster because my mum had gone away for the weekend. So my dad was like, "Right, this weekend you each get a game to rent. We're going to play it. It's going to be a great weekend." And I saw Tomorrow Never Dies, and I was like, "Oh, that looks like the guy in the front of Goldeneye," and it was. So I was absolutely excited, absolutely buzzing, I should say, buzzing being excited in British, not drunken American.
Ouch.
And
Okay.
we we stormed home. I remember exactly what I had for lunch that day. I had French bread, tara salata. I ate it so quickly so I could play the game as quickly as possible. And I don't know what it was. It just clicked. I remember that loading screen for the first time, the way the light goes across loading at the bottom. I remember the music for the first time. And it was an amazing experience. And I think because I was so hyped up at like 8 years old, I would have enjoyed whatever game that was. And as the years have gone down, I've replayed it more. And obviously, there are some parts which are significantly clunky, some parts which haven't aged well. But I do think it is actually a legitimately good game, despite what some other people have said. And it's always had a strong nostalgia connection for me. I mean, the soundtrack is on Spotify, and that is a frequent listen. I listen to that like it's going out of fashion. So yeah, it's always been a strong Bond game for me, and it's always been kind of just a nice game I've enjoyed playing. It's strange that I remember the build up to it quite so clearly at such a young age, but it's something that's just obviously stuck with me.
I love stories like that specifically just because you remembered what you ate the day you played it. Like that
Yeah.
is that that's such a strong memory to be able to remember the food. I don't think I have a single memory where I remember the meal I ate before a formative moment. Like I really wish I did at times. And I can see why this game really stuck with you because even though I think you agree with me on this. Like GoldenEye is a better game overall. What I think makes this game interesting, especially for the time, it's a lot more cinematic than what the other games were doing because there was the full motion video and like you would have the scenes from the movies and it was a pretty decent integration like switching back and forth. You know, in retrospect maybe it was kind of silly to do it the way they did it, but you know, for the time I was reading some reviews that came out at the time and they were calling the scenes a little gimmicky. And I can understand why reviewers would think that, but I think as a kid at that time, was probably just blowing your mind. Like, oh my God, like the movie and the game is like integrated. I really feel like it helps make you feel more like Bond because you're seeing the movie and then you're playing the mission of that cutscene, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the film is one of my favorites, and it was as a kid too. That's one I was put on by choice because in the mornings that before school, I'll be able to put a VHS on. It'd always be Tomorrow Never Dies. So seeing my actions backed up by the actual footage from the film is like, oh, I did that this time. And the thing that
Mhm.
really got me was having a full voice acting because, of course, GoldenEye you just had the text at the top. In this one, you had full dubious, in some cases, voice acting was
Yeah,
there. And
not
as
the
you say,
best.
the cinematic as you said, the cinematic experience, you had cutscenes which you couldn't control, very short ones, but they were things. And there was something about it being third person for me that I absolutely adored. Like the fact, just going to cut to a level quickly, the tower. You see Bond turn and shoot and do two very dramatic poses. And I love
Mhm.
that. That was so cinematic. And I love that you could see that as opposed to just being a hand with a gun. And I think
Mhm.
as a young kid, that stood out to me massively. I love the third person element.
I think it works pretty well in this. I'm still a sucker for PS1 graphics, even if they don't always look great. And I think it works kind of. I don't know. It just the whole thing just really works. I can see why the third because when you see a third person character, it's like you can it's a hit or miss, I guess, because some people like the first person because then it feels like you are that character. But when it's third person, it's like well, you can see who you're supposed to be. Versus like you would have if you play GoldenEye, you would have no idea what Bond looks like in any of the stuff
Mm.
that's happening. Versus third person, it kind of makes you feel more like you're playing the movie, and it kind of fits in with what they were going for with the cutscenes to add into it. And you mentioned the voice acting cast, so let's real quick talk about them. Adam Blackwood voiced Bond, Miles Anderson voiced Q, Eve Karpf voiced Waylon, Larissa Murray voiced Paris Carver, Karen Pascoe voiced M, Steve Hope Wynn was Elliot Carver, Miles Anderson is Dr. Kaufman, and Miles Anderson once again is Satoshi Isagura.
Now, this is an interesting point because recently I
Hmm.
read a book called The Many Lives of 007 by Mark Edlitz, and they actually talk to Adam Blackwood in that about being James Bond. And
Oh, really?
he categorically said he has never ever played James Bond, which is
Huh.
fascinating. And when you look, if you in the beginning sequence of the game, they take the entire intro sequence but put the game's cast on there. And the first name, a name you didn't mention, is Stephen Critchlow. So I'm wondering if he was actually Bond this whole time because yeah, they talked about Adam Blackwood and with the amount of stuff he's done in Bond games, he's explicitly said he's never done Bond's voice, even though he's assumed to have done it in Tomorrow Never Dies, which is very nerdy of me to bring up, but I find it fascinating.
That's wild. I had no idea. I wonder. That So
Yeah,
the developer
if you,
for this was Black Ops Entertainment. I wonder I don't this is a long shot. They still in business? They were in business. They did mobile apps up until like they shut down in '06. It seems like.
oh geez,
Um though John Body, the guy who kind of directed this game and worked on others, ended up going. I think he's still making games. I want to say, wow, actually, yeah. So like, if I go to blackopsentertainment.com, though, it redirects to a different website, which is very frustrating. So I don't know what's going on with that, but what is
hmm.
happening? Yeah, that's so weird. It just goes straight to another website, like it completely redirects. So I don't know what's going on with that, but I would love to see if I can get a hold of someone who worked at this time, like who worked on this game, and see if I can find a way to get them to talk about it. Like maybe there'll be
Yeah.
something cool.
I think the
Um,
only thing I can think is that the Steven Critchlow bloke is the first on the credits in the video game part, and that's the only person I could think of because, as you said, everyone else has their significant parts, and I'd always assumed it was Adam Blackwood, but no, but the book was The Many Lives of 007 by Mark Edlitz. Flat out says it, which is peculiar.
that is that's very peculiar. That's odd. So real quick before we continue to go into the game, I do think we should at least talk about the movie because without the context of the movie, some of the stuff we're going to bring up with the game won't make a lot of sense because there are parts in this game which don't make any fucking sense, and I kind of love that, but it doesn't make any sense at the same time. So, a real quick overview of the movie. 'Cause normally, I would use this as an excuse to let's deep dive into the movie, let's deep dive into the game, but we're going to have you on to the Still Bonding show on Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. Subscribe, please. We're going to have you on the Still Bonding show at some point for this movie. Admittedly, it's going to take a couple months to a year or two for you to be on by the time we get to Tomorrow Never Dies, but we're going to save this discussion of the movie for that episode. But we can still go over just some bare bones real quick. The basic premise of this movie is that Bond must stop a man named Elliot Carver, who is trying to uh, take his multimedia empire. It's called Tomorrow, and basically he wants to start creating news stories so that way he can be the first one to report on them, and so that way he can be the first to report on them, and that way his newspaper will get more popular and he'll make more money and all that other stuff. So in order to do that, he starts he starts creating news stories. And by doing that, I don't mean just like making fake ones. I mean fucking he sinks a British naval vessel and blames it on the Chinese to start World War III because he wants headlines. That is the overall premise of this movie. That's what he's trying to do. And Elliot Carver is played by Jonathan Pryce, one of the most famous actors of all time. He was in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies as well. Um, and also, he was in Game of Thrones. I remember he was the one. He was a villain in Game of Thrones. He was a good villain, and he was a really good villain in that show. Anyway, so he eats the fucking scenery in this movie. He is comically over the top, um, and just it's just insane. So he tries to pit the UK versus against China, which actually we were talking off mic. You were saying how it's a little bit uh, a little bit topical with how much the media is, like how much does the media tell us it's true, blah blah blah. Like that's a little topical to now because that's a very common narrative. Or how much can we trust the media that we intake, type of thing. That's definitely a common narrative now. I would also say the war with China is the potential war and fallout with China is also a real narrative, at least for us over here in the U.S. I don't know uh, in other places, but there's been that fear over the last couple of years. So that's interesting. But I do find it funny Elliot Carver's method for world domination or news world domination is three. What was it? It's three things. It's newspaper, magazines, and radio.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing because Bond didn't have to do anything. The internet was going to stop him in like 4 years.
You say that. Hopefully, the internet would have stopped him in 4 years.
Yeah. Well, he's that rich. He would have just adapted and adjusted to the internet. But still, it is kind of funny to think like the tenets of his business are all things that the internet has effectively killed over the last like decade, over the last 20 years or so. It's
Mhm.
kind of funny. And Michelle Yeoh is also in the movie as a character named Wei Lin. She is a Chinese secret agent. She thinks the Chinese government thinks something's fishy as well, and they kind of send her to look into it. So her and Bond are working to basically make peace between this country and these two countries, and make them both realize that there is no wars going on. It's just Elliot Carver creating the flames, excuse me, and then fanning them. And without going beat by beat, that's pretty much the overview of the movie. Do you have anything to add though, Chris? Or are there anything you want to highlight? I did a very bare bones overview. I just said what
Mm.
the basic plot was. Obviously, Bond stops him, but is there what
Yeah.
like do you think we should go a little bit more in depth? Like, is there stuff you would want to bring up?
I'd say one thing that's significant is the device called the encoder,
Hmm.
which when the British ship is sunk, it displays an incorrect position and says they are in the South China Sea. So obviously both sides have different information. And that becomes a bit of a MacGuffin throughout the first half of the film and later on. And it's also an introducing point to quite a few characters, like Satoru Ishiguro, for example. I'd say that's a major plot point that in the game is important too. Apart from that, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's your classic Bond flick. There's a helicopter chase because most Bond films have a helicopter chase. There's a big explosion at the end. And it's one of the first times you ever see dual wielding Bond. So I'd say those are the, the most important points of the film.
That's true. I've even thought about that. And they really so the encoder, like you said, is what the U.S. uses to help their ships track each other using the GPS. And
Mhm.
it's a common trend in Bond movies that they use whatever the hottest new technology is on the market that's at least more well known to the public. Like this goes back for years. There's hovercrafts in some of the Bond. I think in even freaking on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think there's hovercrafts in that movie, which was like a new technology, that kind of thing. So the Bond
That's it.
movies have always been.
That was
Sorry,
Diamonds
what?
Are Diamonds Are Forever has
Done.
the hovercraft, and it's Majesty's Secret Service has the camera, the very small camera they use, which is actually that had been in spy actuality for years by that point. But that was the first time modern audiences have got seen something like that. But yeah, as you say, the technology in Bond films has always kind of been a couple of steps ahead of what it's actually happening.
Or it's something that is like so brand new that no one had really seen it before. And
Yeah.
sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. Like in The World Is Not Enough, it has the Parahawks.
Yep.
Those things were real, but they did not take off at all.
Yeah.
But and you can tell GPS is new in this because they keep spelling out the acronym, the GPS, the Global Positioning Satellite. They say it
Mm.
all the time in the movie. Like it's just beat into your face. Like this is what GPS stands for. And to be fair, the people like the public probably didn't know what GPS was back then. So I
Mm.
understand why they did it, but it is still kind of funny that they have to like really beat it into your head. Uh I don't know why, but that gets me thinking of like other things that they call like a bit like not a bizarre amount of attention to, but like they call a lot of attention to in the Bond movies. Every time you see Felix Leiter, you always see Felix is Bond's like CIA best friend. And he goes, Felix, you owed fraud or something like that. He always has to say his name and have some crazy greeting because it's a different actor every time. So they have to
Yeah.
blatantly out like, Felix, oh my God, buddy, what's up?
I remember you from such adventures as.
Do you remember the time we were in Cuba together? Cuba. But so
Love it.
yeah, the big difference is so the beginning of the movie, it we can kind of use this to kind of go through the story of the game a little bit,
Mhm.
to kind of talk about the individual missions. So let's kind of do that. Let's talk about some of the individual missions. Maybe we'll go through each one because there's only 10, so it's not like we'd be here for a large amount of time. In fact, I would argue you can lump the first two missions in together because
Mm.
I didn't take too many notes for this because I've seen the movie so much and I only had so much info I could find on the development. Um, I did find it odd that a fifth of the game, the first two out of the 10 missions, take place during the cold open of the movie, which is
Mm.
less than 10 minutes of the total film. The film's like what, like an hour and 50, an hour 40, something like that. It's like almost
Around
two
that, yeah.
hours. So the first 10 minutes of a nearly 2 hour film gets two missions in this game, a full fifth of the game.
Mm.
And the cold open in the movie is basically Bond is at a terrorist arms bazaar, which I highly doubt would actually really exist in real life, but a terrorist arms bazaar, and he has a secret spy satellite camera that he's filming the bazaar to send it back to M over in London, who is sitting with a British general or a British commander and a Soviet commander because it's the arms bazaar is happening in Russia, and they are discussing what should we do. There's a lot of they're identifying all these different terrorists. You see Henry Gupta played by Ricky Jay, who actually, rest in peace, buddy. He passed away somewhat recently.
Yes, he
Um,
did, didn't he?
he did. He was a magician in Vegas. He was a
Mhm.
stage magician, I believe. But he played the techno terrorist Henry Gupta, who I love this line. He was a student what was it? He was a student radical, or no, he was a radical student at Berkeley in the 60s or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, but now he sells his politics for cash.
Yeah.
I love that line. So he plays this he plays basically like the tech guy of Elliot Carver, who he's the guy who's responsible for the whole, like, using this encoder that he gets from this Russian arms bazaar to to mess with the GPS tracking system of the British ships, would send them off course into the China Sea, into China's territorial waters, and that's how the whole thing gets started and blah blah blah.
Mm.
And then sorry, I guess we should explain what Carver actually does to instigate this war is he sinks the British vessel in China Sea after he shoots two missiles at the Chinese MiG. So China thinks the British shot at them, and the British thinks China sunk their naval vessel. So that's how the whole thing starts, and it's all because of this guy Gupta that Bond has spotted at the arms bazaar in the beginning. And they also reference a man named Satoshi Isagura, who shows up later in the game, and I thought it was a very, but now, it makes more sense now that what you were saying before, Chris, how this was supposed to be a continuation. I read that too, but I didn't know that the premise of the continuation was going to be going after Isagura as like the
Mm.
main story of it. So that makes a lot more sense why they have this Isagura mission later on, which we'll get to. Um,
Well, actually, I
but
think what
in
you said with this as well, that also comes into why perhaps the first two levels are from the pre-title sequence, because we know that they had a significant amount of development for that. I imagine one of the levels of Tomorrow Never Dies, the continuation, which what it was expected to be, as announced by Advert and numerous other resources before it tested poorly of audiences. I
Mhm.
imagine that level, Outpost especially, was probably meant to be a level in the continuation game, which they just changed the ending to make Bond jump off a parachute and into the Arms Bazaar and whack that into the beginning. That would make a bit of sense to me because they had some levels completed. When you get to like Convoy, and obviously you get to the ski ranch. I imagine those were probably put there. So I imagine that's actually the game that was originally, and they went, we can add this in. This works, and that's it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So just to be clear, you're saying the convoy and the ski ridge, those are the missions from the game that didn't test all that they put into this new one, right? That's what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
I think they would have had full levels that by that point, and for them it's easy enough to repurpose. And I think that's what I assume happened.
I agree with you. I think that's I agree with that narrative. We're going to say it's fact then. um, but no, they spend, you know, 2 full missions of this cold open where, like I said, Bond is investigating this arms bazaar, and the British and Russian general dudes are like, oh, we see enough terrorists here, so we're just going to blow this. We're going to wipe this thing off the face of the earth. We're going to blow it to hell and back. So they shoot a missile at it, and Bond is trying to say like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And they're like, yeah, we see what it's a Jeep in front of a plane. Like, what are you talking about? And when the Jeep finally moves, there's 2 nuclear missiles on it. It escalates pretty damn quickly. The British guys can't abort their Scud missile or whatever. They're not Scud, but their missile that's going to blow that place to hell and back, which there's enough, as the Russian dude says in the movie, there's enough plutonium to make Chernobyl look like picnic. So the Bond has to escape with these nuclear warheads, so that way when the missile destroys the arms bazaar, it doesn't create a nuclear Armageddon. So Bond has to get those missiles out, and he does, and that's the cold open. Like, there's a cool action set piece which I won't describe beat by beat because that'll be for the Still Bonding episode in a year or so. And in the game, they expand upon it a little bit. In the first mission, Outpost, it's Bond getting to the arms bazaar, and he has to like scuttle like a communication array, so that way he can, I guess it's either jamming his video signal or whatnot. And then the second mission is actually at the arms bazaar, where he takes photos of all the different things being sold, and then he has to get on the plane and fly out of the arms bazaar in under a certain amount of time. And I loved, this will be real quick, and then I want to hear your thoughts on these first 2 missions. I loved the end of of the arms bazaar mission 2, because it felt like the movie. Because in the movie, Bond hops into the jet fighter, and the jet fighter is like rotating 360 degrees, and he's just shooting all the enemy. Stuff's blowing up everywhere. Guys are dying all over the place. And in the game, you get to kind of redo that. So the plane will turn around slowly in a 360, and it just lets you blow everything up until you can finally take off. So I really love that part of it. But before I talk any more about my thoughts on these levels, Chris, I want to hear more about your thoughts on these levels. So what do you got?
I think the fact it's 2 levels, for me, it makes complete sense. The pre-title sequence in Bond films is normally an action bit that is loosely tied to the rest of the film, but gives the audience a quick bit of satisfaction before settling in for the next hour and a half or so. And with this, if we just jump straight into the arms bazaar, that's not a great tutorial style level. It's very boxed in. It's not great for learning how to maneuver. And then all of a sudden you're put under pressure to get into the plane and have that amazing moment that you're talking about. I think to have a level of Outpost where it starts off the adventure whilst being able to link it very tenuously, but giving you a bigger open space, giving you a unique experience, I think it blends together very well. And for how action-packed a pre-title sequence is, I can understand why they break that down into 2 parts. And I think Outpost is probably my favorite level of the game, just because the soundtrack is amazing. The way it builds up is amazing. The ski out of nowhere, like the ski bit, absolutely love that. If you're a long-time Bond fan, and all of a sudden you're skiing, which I think with reasonably good mechanics, and then getting the Union Jack reference, I think that's a great first level to a game. And sometimes with video games, there's enough creative licensing opportunities that they can create their own thing. And while it is great to experience some parts of the game, I think a mesh is the best, which is why I think, okay, having a kind of unique experience in a familiar environment, then backed up by what happens in the movie, that gets you hyped every time. Every time I played that, I as you say, I'd always play Dam and Facility and Runway together in GoldenEye. I will always play Outpost and Bazaar together because they just work so well in that front. And the fact you've raised it as like kind of why would they bother doing 2 levels? It works so well. I'd never considered that before.
I think I agree with you that that cold open needed 2 levels. I 100%. Like you said, the first area is very wide open, so it allows you to get used to the controls. I mean, the first area is just this big open, like, I it's it's basically like this little cove with cave, like, mountain walls or rock walls all around you, making sure you can't walk up there, that kind of thing. Um but there's no enemies there at first because it allows you have to walk maybe like 5 6, like it'd be 5 or 6 seconds worth of running, but in game time that's enough for the player to start understanding the controls. Like, they don't put enemies right in front of you, and even when they do, there's maybe only 2 or 3 enemies
Hmm.
right from the get-go. And you take them out. Though I will say, this game, they give you a silencer on your pistol, and it's great because it's unlimited ammo. You never have to worry about ammo for your pistol, and I love that. But this game does not do stealth at all. Like you try to stealthily shoot an enemy that doesn't see you, that you can clearly see on screen. The pistol has no range at all, and it
Hmm.
drives me up a wall. I'm like, I can't get within range to shoot this guy because they see me. The AI is coded in a way that they generally see you. So my 90% of my strategy, even in this first level, is just fucking booking it straight up to the dude's face and just unloading a clip into him, because you have unlimited ammo. There's no need to like really worry about conserving it. Um, but back to what you're saying, I do agree. Like, this you needed to take the cold open into 2 levels, because the first one was kind of getting you used to the controls, and the second one's kind of getting used to the combat. And also, the second level, the Arms Bazaar, starts off in kind of like a maze like area. There's lots of different boxes for you to explode, or a lot of different like crates for you to meander around. And it also
Hmm.
teaches you that sometimes you have to be a little creative. Like, you have to blow up one box to get to the last objective, which is taking a picture of a helicopter. With that said, I don't think it's very intuitive, but I also don't think it's completely impossible to figure. It's not impossible
Hmm.
to figure out, but it's also not the easiest. Um, what was I going to say?
I feel like there's definitely a benefit with that part as well, because in the first level, when you destroy the satellite, you have to get the laser guidance system, and there you go, laser
Mhm.
the guidance bit coming up again. It holds your hand through that so much. It's like, okay, now press square, now go left, now go above the med kit, which I think is quite a cool little gimmick. I like how you can actually have different gadgets at a time.
Yeah.
And the first time you do it, hold your hand. The second time, it's somewhat independent, and so that gives that gives the positive reinforcement to the gamer that, hey, you're learning to be James Bond. So I feel like that helps, especially when it's with like, okay, plant this, take a picture of this, move on and continue. I think with the combat, as you were saying, the stealth, I associate lots of Bond games with stealth and the fact you can be stealthy. I know in Tomorrow Never Dies there is a way you can stealth take out enemies, but after all this time, it's still very hit or miss. Like, you have to go up behind them, not get spotted,
Yeah.
hit the
Yeah.
fire, and then you can hit their neck. But if there is a pixel that isn't in the right place, it's not going to work. So unfortunately,
Dude,
it does hold back
holy
on that front.
yeah. 100%. It's the same just for picking up ammo. It's impossible. Like, you have to be on the dead set. You can be touching the actual ammo box, but if you're not touching the pixel you're supposed to touch, which is the dead center of the ammo box, like the tiny
Mm.
little rod of pixels that you can't see in the center of the ammo crate or whatever it is, then you don't pick it up. There are so many times I ran over like health kits because even though I touched them, I wasn't at the far enough into them. um, what I was gonna say though about the reason I was just so surprised that they spent 2 missions for this cold open, it's not the fact they didn't need 2 missions. Like, I understand why they broke it up the way they did. It just is absurd to me that they took a fifth of the game to elaborate on 10 minutes of a 2-hour movie. Like, just, but when you break down the movie at the same time, like, after the Arms Bazaar, what's the next semi actiony set piece in the movie? And it's the Carver Media Building, because
Yeah.
everything in between that is Bond going to, like, Bond escaping from the bazaar, action set piece, makes sense for the level. Then it's a lot of talking in the movie, which is interesting, but that's not going to really work in this style of a game.
Yeah, at that point, you can't have the Devonshire being sunk. You can't have Bond being given his mission. I mean, to be fair, I'm amazed they were able to make a level out of the actual press gala they had, which of course was a media in this one. They turned that into a level which, if I'd seen the film, seeing as the only action point is him kind of breaking out of the window and turning off the power, I wouldn't have necessarily been confident they could have turned that into a level, but they did. I would probably have assumed the next natural one would have been pressing engagement. So as you say, yeah, it's a fifth of the game, but the first chunk, there's a lot of exposition.
Exactly. And I understand why you can't really have a level on that. So it as much as it's frustrating to me that they spent a fifth of the game in the first 10 minutes of the movie, at the same time, a lot of Bond movies is, especially Bond movies are interesting for me where they get the, they're considered action movies, but they've become more actiony as time goes on. But if you look at some of the older, I guess they were always kind of action movies. I don't know. I just consider them like they're definitely action movies, but I've seen a lot more action movies with more action, if that makes sense.
It's a weird one. So, brief rant. The first Bond film, Doctor No, isn't particularly actiony. From Russia of Love is one of the best espionage films of all time. And as you say, there are action set pieces, but it's not an action film. Tomorrow Never Dies is certainly an action film, but there's certain things they have to adhere to, and especially when it comes to plot. And that's where I feel like the game suffers a bit, because the opening cutscenes by the incredibly decent voice actress who does M, they try to cram so much into one. It's like, oh, this ship sunk, and now there's a satellite, and now you have to do this. And it's like, whoa. But I feel like they knew that most people playing the game weren't going to be looking for a deep synopsis on Tomorrow Never Dies, so it can get away with it on that front.
I'm with you on that. We can move on then to the Carver Media Party and pressing engagement. We'll kind of do these in two mission chunks. Then the pressing engagement in terms of the movie, after the whole thing that happens, the Devonshire, the British naval vessel is sunk. MI6 suspects Elliot Carver because his newspaper knew before the British government knew about what happened to the Devonshire and its crew. So, which, I'm sorry, in terms of the movie, if you're this crazy plan, did you not think that was going to raise some eyebrows? Did you not think that would, you should have at least waited till you knew the British government knew, and then you could post it, and then the British government would at least think, oh, we have a leak or something like that, versus how would they know if the British government didn't even know, whatever. So that's a criticism of the movie. But in this one, they ask Bond to investigate Carver, and they want Bond to use his relationship with Carver's wife because Bond and Carver's wife, why am I blanking? Paris. They did the nasty a couple times. They bumped some uglies.
I'll say fun fact, last movie thing I'm going to do for a while. There was talks about it being Pam Bouvier from License to Kill.
Really?
That was meant to be a consideration at some point, but it fell through, unfortunately. So that's meant to be the sort of relationship, like a previous Bond girl who is now resurfaced as the wife of the media.
That would have been genius. And in all honesty, Pam Bouvier would have made the most sense out of all previous Bond girls. She's the only one that kind of really seemed to have the other Bond girls in the other movies, they fall for Bond, but it's always very oh, James. Versus Pam Bouvier from License to Kill felt more like a genuine affection for Bond. It wasn't just he didn't win her over because he's good in bed. He won her over because of him. Versus all the other ones, it was always that cliche of Bond's just such a good lover that he just happens to turn lesbian straight.
The man with the magic cock.
Yeah, pretty much. And listeners, by the way, that's fucking true. That's happened in more than one Bond movie where he's turned a lesbian straight. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not condoning it, but it's
just a point of note.
It's just a point of note. But Pam Bouvier is the character that didn't seem like that. Sorry. The man with the magic cock. That's so funny.
He has a powerful weapon.
He charges $1 million a shot. For those who don't know, that is the Man with the Golden Gun song. We'll be out. We'll move on. Oh my god. Uh, sorry, I'm still just laughing because the other line in that song is he comes just before the kill.
Yeah. Love is required whenever he's hired. He comes
Yeah,
just before the kill.
there we go. That song, I'm not gonna lie. We could go so many. We're both Bond fans, if you couldn't tell. But that song, I think, is an underrated Bond song. That song fucking slaps. It's so good. It's absurd. There's so much happening in it, and it shouldn't work. It's all the wrong stuff happening at the same time that makes it all right.
It was at the time where Bond was at that time, it was the perfect song.
It was so wild. Anyway, okay, so they send Bond to go check into like what, use his relationship with Mrs. Carver so that way he can find out more about Elliot's, media empire. And that's the whole premise of this. It's at a media party, like this news gathering where Carver's going to launch his satellite network and blah blah blah. And in the movie, Bond just gets captured for a brief moment and gets thrown into like this soundproof room where he beats the shit out of some guys, and then he turns off the power to the whole event. And in the game, they also do that. And this is one of the first instances of what I noticed in this game is Bond and eventually Wei Lin gets captured a lot in this game. Like at least this one at least is part of the movie, so I understand it. But there is numerous times in other parts of the movie, in other parts of the game, where Bond gets captured only to then like, I think he even gets captured in the Hotel Atlantic as well, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure anymore.
He kind of gets tricked in Hotel Atlantic. He gets knocked out in the tower.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And to be fair, Bond was captured in the tower in Saigon as well. Anyway, but
I thought there's a difference between being captured and being knocked out in exactly the same way.
Yeah, that's true. It just felt too samey to the Carver Media Party thing. But Bond, goes in there and takes out the bad guys and shuts the power down and gets I think he collects a data disk as well in the game. This is all now game talk. And in the fourth mission, the second one we're going to talk about in this chunk is called Pressing Engagement, and it's where Bond goes to investigate Carver's news printers, like the actual printing companies where he goes to print his newspapers and whatnot, to see if he can find any information. I believe in the movie this is where he finds like the encoder, and he kind of sees the satellite that Gupta is talking about and whatnot. And in this, I forget exactly all the different objectives that you have to get, but I actually really liked this level. What were your thoughts on these though?
Pressing engagement, I'm going to give you a weird fact here. I've always been one who's enjoyed Bond fashion in a way. I've never had the paychecks that can support it, but I've always enjoyed getting homages. Like right now, I'm wearing my Tomorrow Never Dies tie from that exact scene. And in the game, he wears a very distinctive blue suit, and blue is one of my favorite suit colors to wear. I'm pretty sure it's precisely because of this mission, because of that look.
Oh.
So it's one that stuck with me for a significant amount of time. I'd say media is a pretty standard level, which you can talk about. It's kind of okay. Pressing engagement is one of the highlights of the game. One thing as a gamer that's always stood out to me is polish. It's a very kind of, what's the word? Shallow thing to possibly say, but I've always liked polish in a video game because it shows the people who are making it are taking care with it. You can have all the great gameplay, you can have all the great mechanics, but if there's not that extra level, it looks like you're just kind of jumping through hoops. And pressing engagement has the most polish of any level in this game. The fact if you shoot the people above the printing presses in a certain way, they fall into the press like in the film. I absolutely adore. The fact that all the people there are wearing the red blazers that the people there wear, I love. And the fact you have to click the screen to find the encoder, because in the film, obviously, Bond is looking around trying to figure out where it could be hidden. And of course, it's next to drugs and porn, as in most standard hiding places.
Of course.
But all the little bits. Exactly. Yeah. It's where I keep my high quality encoder. But this is the one that made me feel the most like Tomorrow Never Dies, like I was actually playing the film. This one was just so spot on, and I don't know what it is about it. It's got a cutscene at the end which is exactly well timed. It's like perfect to a degree, and I just love the level design. Isn't particularly fantastic. I mean, there's nothing particularly special about it. It's just so many little references to the film that if you've watched the film, you can't help but think of it. And I love that level for it. I think I don't know what it is. This one has a really strong emotional response to me, and sometimes I can't just
Mhm.
explain why. I just love playing this level. If I ever throw in Tomorrow Never Dies, I play Outpost first, then I play Pressing Engagement.
I like pressing. I'm with you on this. I think it's the best level so far. I actually like Hotel Atlantic as well, but I think what I like about this level and actually Hotel Atlantic as well, it reminds me a lot of old school FPS design where it's kind of like this is a weird thing to enjoy because I know it's not very in fashion at all anymore, but like the fact that when you kill all the enemies in an area, they generally don't come back. You're just walking down empty hallways of area and it becomes this very like lonely experience at the end. It's like you kind of have it's almost like you the player have to live with the fact that you just killed all these people until you're walking by yourself down these hallways. Um I don't know
Well,
why, but I sorry, what?
it's also got that PS1 draw distance, which is very prevalent in Tomb Raider 2, where you
Yeah.
can't see that far in front of you, and it makes it dark. And I just think about the loneliness, because you can't just see what's in front of you. Yes, you're on edge about somebody possibly being there, but you know they're not going to be there because you just shot that guy.
Mhm. Oh, it's weird too because in speaking of that draw distance, later on in the terrorist convoy mission, which we'll get to in a little bit, the draw distance is really far on that, and I'm like, why is the draw distance so far on this, but not? Is there just more polygons on screen right now, so they can't render as much, and that's why I don't know. It was so weird to me that they were doing that. Um,
Hmm.
but no, I'm with you on press engagement. I love the fact that there are so many moments like the movie. Then we have the next mission. We're going to talk about Hotel Atlantic by itself because I feel like missions 6 and 7 we can group together pretty well. Hotel Atlantic is a is the scene in the movie. It's one of the first times that I really think that the game majorly diverts from the movie, from the source material. So in the movie Hotel Atlantic, Bond, after the whole pressing engagement thing where Bond's investigating the newspaper like factory, whatever you want to call it, he gets a call back to the hotel he's staying at where Paris, who he had just in the movie he had just slept with, and she told him about the newspaper place. She's now captured by this guy named Dr. Kaufman, played by Vincent Chevalier. That's the actor's name.
There you go.
Uh,
Smashed it.
which is strange because he's a comedian, if I remember correctly. He
Mhm.
wasn't known to play like a villain type of character, but his character is like this sadistic type of torturer that gets information out of people. And he basically what he wants to do in the movie is that he has killed Paris, and he when Bond comes to try to save her, sees that she's already dead. He finds Dr. Kaufman, and Dr. Kaufman's trying to frame Bond for the murder of Paris, make it look like he did it, even though obviously it was Kaufman.
That's a
In the
murder then
game,
suicide, and it's got the best line in the
yes.
film, which is like, "You can't make it look like a suicide if I'm sitting over here." To which he says, "I could shoot you from Stuttgart and get the desired effect," which is one of my favorite lines in all of Bond.
I love Brosnan's acting in that scene. Like you can see him like really trying to play it cool. He's definitely upset by Paris, but he's really trying to be like, no, this doesn't affect me. And
Yeah.
you know, like deep down it does, but like I love that he played it cool in that moment because that's what Bond would do. Bond would
Mm.
stuff that emotion down and be like, this is gonna be trauma for me later. I can't deal with this right now.
Yeah.
Um but in the game, you have to fight your way through this is actually I like the level design of this area a lot, but I hate the level, if that makes sense. Like there's just so many enemies everywhere. I like how the hotel is laid out. I like how the mission structure works, but there's just too many enemies. Like this was I think one of the hardest levels next to the market district, which we'll get to.
Mm.
Um at least in my opinion. But in this, you know, Bond's rushing back through. He's going to rescue Paris, but before you get to Paris, you have to have a boss fight with um I already said his name, Dr. Kaufman. You have to have a boss fight with Kaufman, and this leads me to one of my biggest criticisms of the game, and we'll get into some of my broader criticisms at the end. But the bosses are not very interesting. It's pretty much they're just bullet sponges. They all
Yeah.
kind of do similar things. The only one that really offered any kind of challenge was there's a missile launcher boss, which we'll get to in the market level. Um, but they have 100 health points or 100 HP. You can see them right up top, and you just kind of shoot and dodge and shoot and dodge. Like, it's generally not very hard as long as you keep moving, and you have an auto aim because of the way the game design is designed. Um, so it's really just kind of an easy fight. But once you beat him, you find Paris, who is still alive, and then you rescue her and leave. So I just thought that was so, like, she's alive still, and I'm like, okay, uh, no problem with that. Like, realistically, Paris did not need to. Actually, you know what? I take that back. The reason she dies in the movie makes sense. She betrays her psychopath husband. Not saying she deserved to die, but like in terms of what the character did, like why Carver killed her or sent Kaufman to kill her, it makes sense why she was murdered by in that situation. Um, that just sounds awful out of context. Sorry. Oh my god. But it makes sense in the movie. It doesn't make sense in the game, but at the same time, it's just, I don't know. The whole thing was just strange. What are your thoughts on this level?
I mean, it's always a surprise when it diverts from the script in such a way as a major character not dying. I mean, that's always a surprise. Well, I think you make a good point. You can't really bring across the anguish that has been caused by Bond and Paris's relationship to Carver. So in that case, play the hero, save the day, say you get her just in time. I think it works well with the concept of the game, and it gives you the video games. Everyone at this point in video game, a timeline. People playing games for a good time. You don't have a downer while you're playing a video game, and that could have been quite an easy one by some chances. And also, it's again the divergence of, hey, we are the Bond video game, but we're our own thing. So I can appreciate that. I think the Hotel Atlantic is a level which, because I know it so well, I think it's fun. But the first time you play it, yeah, I could understand how that's a complete ball ache. I mean, I've played this game so much, I'm to the stage where I know where the bosses are. I know where the enemies are. I know who spawns after you've talked to the bartender who's just wielding a gun.
I forgot. Like, you walk in. Oh wait, sorry. The idea that your first objective in that mission is go talk to the bartender, and literally, it's just like there's all these dudes just walking around with guns. I'm like, is this a party? What is this place? The first guy you see behind a bar isn't a bartender, but he has a gun. The whole thing is just wild.
Well, so I think the fact Bond swans in with his holster showing. I mean, Jesus Christ. But yeah, I like to think personally that actually they got the voice actor to say, "Oh, you meant to go to his room, and your presence is required there as well." And he just played it evil, and your presence is required there as well. And like, well, shit, now we have to give him a gun.
Yeah, that would be actually kind of funny. Like, the whole thing is based off the voice actor just kind of fucking up the line, sort of. But they like the take enough, so they're like, "Well, we got to keep it in."
Yeah, with the Kaufman boss fight, yes, it doesn't bring across any of his character from the film. It's a weak excuse for a boss fight, but it's the first time it happens in the game, and when you get that music kick in, you see the health bar. I can imagine the first time, yeah, actually that works. It's just the issue; it repeats itself about 4 times in the game later on. So that kind of waters it down. And when you're looking at it retrospectively, the first time doesn't seem that special when actually it's kind of just a mini boss in a way. I love the design of the level. I think it fully looks like the hotel in the film, and actually it looks like they had to give lots of other levels that weren't actually shown in the film, and it looks natural. I think it works really well. So yes, while it is one of the most difficult ones, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a least favorite. It's a pretty decent level in my books, but I can understand why somebody might dislike it.
It's not one of my least favorites. Just to be clear, it's not one of my least favorites, but it's just not. I don't know. I just find it it wasn't my favorite, but it's like also like if I'm ranking all these 10 levels, it's not in my top, it's not in the top half for me, but it's not also in like the bottom three. I would say this is like a solid
Okay.
like four. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it's higher than that. Now moving on to mission 6 and 7. The reason I wanted to group these two together instead of what we were doing before, it would have been 5 and 6, but I wanted 6 and 7 together because these are two missions that don't appear in the movie at all. This is probably the largest diversion that you will
Mhm.
see between the game and the movie. None of this happens in the movie, just period. In the sixth mission, it is your Bond standard car chase where you chase down Gupta's. This is the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard. His terrorist convoy. It was a convoy of terrorists going down the highway, just trying to make the best time they can. Oh my! What a ridiculous! Sorry, I
Envoy.
right. All I'm thinking of, I'm thinking of the song Convoy, but now it's all these like Euro terrorists or something like that. It just what a bizarre idea. It's his terrorist convoy. Okay. The level begins though with you on foot having to find Q, who's just standing out in the middle of fucking nowhere. This is the only section I was able to do any semblance of okay stealth. There's a couple enemies you kill. It's like a little mountainous area. You kill a couple enemies, you get into a car, you follow the terrorist convoy. You have to take out 6 cars in a certain amount of time because the road eventually does run out. I actually lost the first time I played this mission because I was lollygagging too much and just trying to explore a little bit with the car. And even though I took out 5 out of the 6 and almost finished off the last car, I just didn't quite make it in time.
Mm.
And then the seventh mission, I'll let you go into both these after I just kind of give the quick overview. The ski ridge camp, you are going after Satoshi Isaguro, who was mentioned earlier in the movie as one of the people who thinks that Gupta helped him with I think it was the Tokyo subway attacks, which I think was a real event. I
Yes.
believe I'm 99% certain it was a real event, but I don't know if Isaguro was actually the guy behind it or not, or if that was just a name they made up for the movie. I'm going to feel real bad if you know what? I'm going to look it up real quick,
I'm
just to
pretty sure it's
make
a name made up for the movie. Just got to imagine that a major film company, creating a character out of a well-known terrorist wouldn't go down particularly well.
yeah, it's a fiction. He's a fictional terrorist. Okay, I just wanted to double check, just to be 100% certain. But yeah, so in this one, you're hunting down Isaguro because it's a really shitty tie-in to do it. Like it's really poorly written. It's like, well, he might have ties with Carver, so you need to go take him out because he already did the subway attack anyway, so he's bad. So you basically ski into this guy's camp. It's the second skiing mission, and then you kill everybody in the camp, and you have another boss fight, and it's as simple as that.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on these two levels though? On the two levels that really just completely diverged from the movie.
Yeah, I think it plays again into the continuation, which, as we said, was literally chasing down Satoru Ishiguro, and the fact, they had some of these levels made. We need to include them. Screw it. Let's just make this, as we say, a fifth of the game again. Let's just throw those in. It's another point in the film when there's a bit of a lull, so I can understand why they did it. I kind of appreciate the divergence because it's
I do
obviously in
too.
the film. In the film, he's kind of. Do you say you do not?
No, I do. I do.
Oh, okay, you do. In the film, Satoru Ishiguro is mentioned very briefly, but actually, if you go around the oh god, was it the pressing engagement level? You can see he's actually got an office there next to Gupta's. He's actually got his name on the door.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you with the investigation, they're obviously trying to say he's a major character in this style of the game.
Yeah.
Like I can appreciate that, and with Gupta too. I mean, there's deleted scenes in the film of Henry Gupta doing card tricks and throwing out candles. He's meant to be a bigger presence in the film than he was, so it's nice he gets a little bit more of a nod in the game. Convoy is a really tricky level for me because I love the first half of that level. The music, the stealthily being able to take down people. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then shitty, almost on rails car chase. I
Yeah.
really despise that bit. It's the only bit of the game I actively dread, which is weird because the first half of that level I love. You said you failed because you were lollygagging and missed out. I failed on that level because I accidentally shot Q in the face. Because during that you have an infrared scope, and all the enemies turn up as red. So as a kid, I remember this getting into the zone, killing everybody that was red, and then I shot a bad guy, and it says you have failed. Q has died, and I was like, oh god, what have I done?
This poor old man. Him and his sausage hands.
I just wanted to give you your BMW and I give him a shot in the jugular.
I mean, you
But
still
yeah,
take the BMW. Let's be real.
yeah, exactly. You can still complete the mission. Um, but yes, the first half of that level is also got there's a bit of PS1. Like you were talking about how like PS1 graphics, like they kind of really like respond to you. They really give you a good emotional feeling. This has my
Yes.
favorite thing, which is like PS1 and Darkness. And Croc 2 did it perfectly. Tomb Raider does it amazingly. And this is one I rank up with that, where the draw distance actually matches the kind of the environment. And I think it works
Yes.
beautifully. To then cock it up with the crappy car chase doesn't sit too well with me. Although, moving on to the ski ridge, there's a moment in that scene. Every single game it shows kind of Bond, the time in military, and then you kick off. This one has one where it says time. I think it's 2000 hours, so I think it's 8 o'clock at night, and it shows time. It shows Bond chilling with his skis. Then it shows his feet, the skis turning, and the Bond theme kicking in. And for me as a kid, that was such a cool Bond moment. I love that.
Yeah.
There were times I actually, I'd pause the level, quit it, and restart it just so I could see that moment because I thought it was such a cool little thing to add. And I'm sure to many other people it wasn't that significant, but for me as a kid, that was so cool. And I loved it. And follow up with a ski level, which I love in this game, was ideal. I loved it. The ski dynamics in this work amazingly. Overall, Ski Ridge, I think, is a fantastic level. After you get there, there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of intrigue, there's a good opportunity for stealth if you have the patience. And I think the level design of that one is pretty good. Yes, it ends with a really crappy boss fight. At least this one has green gas, like fluorescent green gas that can hurt you.
Yes. There is an extra mechanic thrown in. You're right.
Yeah, but overall, yeah. While Convoy is the best, like the best and the worst at the same time, I think Ski Ridge holds up for me really well. And the draw distance this time, I think they draw distance, but they cover it in grey, which kind of adds to this blizzardy kind of snowy feeling.
Yeah.
And it's also got that thing again where they have a helicopter taking off, which they last revisited in Outpost, which I don't know why they did it. They have it twice in the game. I assume it's just to say, hey, here's an extra little bit of polish, here's some extra graphics. There's a helicopter taking off, which I assume they thought was cool.
I think it's just to immerse you a little bit more. Like it's to make you feel like, oh, this base is active and you're skiing into an active base. It's funny that you like the skiing so much because I am lukewarm on it. I actually think skiing in the first mission is fine. It's decent enough. I hated the skiing in Ski Ridge. The forest was way too thick and you can't control your skier that well. There's a couple times where I would be skiing and I got nudged into a rock by a dude and I would die instantly. And I understand that's going to happen, but there was like moments where there was literally no place for me to go because they made it the level too densely populated with trees and rocks, and the combat on the skis is awful. You cannot hit a guy for the life of you. I don't think the skiing mechanics themselves are bad. I think the actual controls for the skis are fun. I felt in control of Bond the whole time while he was on those skis, but I think specifically the Ski Ridge level is a little too cramped for my liking. That to me, that's a little bit more personal taste. But I think like you can make an objective argument that the combat on skis in this game is awful. You can't hit anybody, and it was, oh my god, it drove me. I just gave up trying at some point.
That's what I find weird because I don't know if it's because I played the game so much. I figured out there's two attacks you can do. There's the push and then there's the jab. And with time, I managed. I say with time, like naturally, I can kind of put off the two together and I can get the combat done pretty well. but that may just be because of how much I played this game as a kid. I mean, I remember there being parts where I did die numerous times. The thing that annoyed me the most as a kid, I had no idea how to do specific tricks. One time I did this weird flaily thing, which didn't look cool. Next time I do like this spy who loved me style flick, and I was like, I want to do that every time. And it does affect your weird style meter at the end, which is only ever on the ski levels I found.
Okay.
But I kind of enjoyed them, and also I don't know if this is something you did. When I played these games as a kid, I always used the D-pad, which made a huge amount of difference. And that's the thing, I play all PS1 games with the D-pad. I think it's just the way I'm programmed. I think with analog stick it could be difficult. With D-pad, the quick turns you need to make to avoid trees works really well.
Well, so this game I played it on the PS3 to stream it, but it doesn't let you play with a joystick or with one of the analog sticks. You have to play with the D-pad. So I was playing with the D-pad, but it's still the controls itself was fine. It was just the combat, like I said, the combat is what really killed it for me. I could not seem to get anything going for it. So it just I don't know. I It's not a bad level. I don't mind the combat once you get down onto the ground, but I generally do not like the combat on the skis. It just none of the it just didn't work in my opinion. I couldn't. It was so hard it was so hard to find the right spot to actually hit them. Like you don't, and in this game especially, you don't understand the timing all that well. I'm sure maybe you have the practice with it now, but it just I don't think the combat is very good on the skis at all. But it is kind of I did like what I was saying before. I do like that they kind of rounded out. I'm you mentioned it before, and I think I agree with you on this. I like it when games that are based off of a movie kind of take liberties with the movie story in some ways, or like GoldenEye does it a lot too, where there's missions that do not take place in the movie, but it allows you to kind of flesh out more of the world that the movie takes place in. And I like these levels and I like the ideas they try, sort of. I think the Gupta's thing was just bad. Not the level itself. I know, well, the level itself like is a little rough around the edges. I agree, the car chase is rough, but the idea of Gupta's terrorist convoy felt like a stretch to me. I thought
Yeah.
that was really dumb. The idea of going after Satoshi Isagura because they reference him in the movie, I think was a smart callback because he's referenced in the movie. He's referenced to working with Henry Gupta. He, it's I don't know if it's referenced in the movie that he is, but you could at least make that connection because they were at the Arms Bazaar together. So like there is some type of connective story tissue that links those. And so I think it was kind of cool to explore that a little bit more. Even though I'm not a fan of the skiing section leading up to it, I like the idea that the level posits, even if I don't necessarily like the way it's presented.
Mhm.
But yeah, any other thoughts real quick before we move on to we're going to actually try to cover the last three now, just knock them all out so that way we can give our kind of like general thoughts on everything else. So any final thoughts quick on these two missions?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it on that one.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the final three missions. We have the the Carver Media Group, the CMGM Tower in Saigon, and you have the Market District also in Saigon, and then you have the Stealth Boat in Ha Long Bay. Those are the specific locations. I like that they give you the specific hours on all these. You referenced it before, but like in Saigon, this is like 5:30 in the morning or whatever. Oh, 530 hours, whatever. I don't know military time, but the in the movie, this is where the game kind of syncs back up with the movie. In the movie, Bond and Wei Lin, which this is your first time meeting Wei Lin, and it feels very forced in this, to say the
Yeah.
least, in the game. But in the movie, Bond and Wei Lin have met a few times before. They actually meet technically at the Carver Media party in the beginning of the movie, but you don't see that in the game. Um, and the whole thing is they're captured by Carver in, I believe, after they're investigating the sunken British ship in the movie, they get captured by Carver and taken to Saigon. In the movie, or in the game, I don't know I it was hard for me to hear the mission briefing, so maybe they explained it in the mission briefings, but they end up in the tower in Saigon. They end up captured by Carver. They have to escape. Waylon initiates the escape, which is kind of cool, and then you have to break out with her. Um, I don't remember much about this level, in all honesty. Like I feel like there was some combat before getting captured. Am I remembering that correctly?
You run around and you have to find a key to open the lift, and then you have to kind of find out where Carver's room is, and then they knock you out, and then you get teleported literally one room away to where the escape happens, and then you run around again.
That's what it is. Yeah, and that made no sense in the movie because they just went straight up there. Bond wasn't going to that tower specifically like they do in the game, so that was kind of weird. In the Market District, they pull Bond out because of their escape from the Carver Media Tower. Carver's got in the whole the military or the police in Saigon to go after them, so they pull Bond out. So Wei Lin has to fight her way through the streets of Saigon to get back to her safe house to decode some disc that you got from the tower, so that way they can find the location of the stealth boat and prevent World War III from happening. And the stealth boat is obviously the stealth boat. So unless you have something specific to talk about with the tower, I really think we can just kind of brush over that quickly to talk about the Market District. This is something I feel you've been waiting to talk about over the whole episode. So instead of me describing it, first, is there anything you want to talk about the tower real quick? And after that, feel free to go straight into your thoughts on the Market District level.
Tower is the only one that feels like a filler level. I mean, I like the combat in it. I think it's a well thought out level. But the issue is at this point in the game, we've done this quite a few times before, Hotel Atlantic being the most obvious example. And while there is a really cool point in the game where you have a cool cutscene with Carver and you have a quick discussion, I mean, they even went to the effort to include all the torture weapons that Stamper has in the actual background. And there's a great shot where Waylon kicks the guy and you see Bond snatch up the gun, shoot to his left, shoot to his right, which as a kid, just like the ski ridge, I love that. I thought that was the coolest thing. But it was just a filler level. I mean, it's really there just to kind of exist as a run around, shoot 'em up level. So I don't really have any strong feelings one way or the other about Tower. I'd say it's probably the weakest level for me, just for the fact it's nothing new or special. Like Convoy, I said half of that level I hate, but there's still the first half, which is new, unique, and I love it. Tower is really just... It's just there. It's a level. It exists. That's it. There's nothing particularly special about it. But Market... Yeah. Market has been the bane of so many people's existence with this game for so long. And I remember this level being the biggest struggle. I mean, I still was able to complete it as a kid and complete the entire game and replay all of them over. Market was the level I played the least. As I've gotten older, I've been able to appreciate it a bit more due to the soundtrack, due to certain level elements. But if you look at the face of it, it's an insane difficulty spike, which isn't present in the last level. And also, you play as Wei Lin, which is really cool, but she has nothing unique about her. She has the same animations as Bond. It's literally just a different model. And
it's like the 3D version of a palette swap,
Exactly. And throughout the game, if you get to a certain bit of, like, if you lose a certain amount of health, you kind of hunch over, you hold your shoulder, and you can still activate. Wei Lin has exactly the same thing. So while it is cool to face off to fight as the Bond girl of the film, it could have just been Bond. Especially as you say, they preference being like, Bond is like, he's too obvious, the police will get him. You're immediately shot at in Market.
Immediately shot at. You're blowing up barricades that have like these mounted machine gun turrets that look like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah. They look like a badly done Dalek from Doctor Who, and
yeah, that's a good description.
Those aren't a big pain because if with the draw distance, you can just see them. Just aim with the reticle using R1, I believe, and you can kill them basically off screen. So they're not a big deal. It's just that the enemy is so well tuned in. And their damage, I think the damage they give you is raised. And you'll be running 100%.
Wayland dies so fast in this.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily Waylon's character being weaker. I just think the way they can. I think the enemies are stronger,
Yeah,
especially as every time you take damage, you flinch for a second, which is a mechanic I've never liked in video games. When you take damage,
same.
it doesn't work out particularly well. And this one is bad because you can flinch 3 times in a row and you're dead. And they put enemies in deliberately annoying places, like on the top of a roof, which you can't look at unless you use R1 to aim. So when you learn the
Yep.
level, it becomes easy enough, but for a first time playing it, it is a pain. The rocket enemy isn't too bad. You get the rocket, which you then need to use to destroy things. Then you have the helicopter, which is a really tough fight because there's
Uh,
no particular exactly. Yeah, the
uh,
helicopter. Yeah, the helicopter, which is a tough fight because there's no particular pattern you follow. You just have to just shoot at it and hope it works. And it lasts long
yep.
enough that you're like, okay, what I'm doing is not making a difference. I have to do something else. And then as soon as you've done that, there's then more enemies sneaking behind corners. And of course, the entire time you've got civilians just dropped in who will walk in front of your gun the entire time. This should
Happened to
be
me
my
a few
least favorite.
times.
Yeah, this should be my least favorite level, but I still do enjoy parts of it because I know it so well. That does help out massively. But yeah, this one is marketed as most difficult level by a landslide, and it is unfairly difficult. There's no build up to this. It just happens to be that difficult, and it's a pain.
I'm with you on that. I think Market it's a really well laid out level. I like how there's lots of like interflowing paths and they all kind of connect to each other. So you have to take one path to go somewhere, then you have to take another path to, um, when you come back. So like I really like how that works. But the difficulty spike is obnoxious. The enemy placement, I'm with you, isn't great. The boss for the rocket launcher is fine. He's harder than the other bosses, I would say, but it's fine. But the grueling slog of having to um get back to your to the beginning of the level, so for you to fight the helicopter, which there's a secret entrance over, there's a secret area that we
Mhm.
found while on stream, which was really cool. But to have that grueling slog to get back there and then fight the helicopter, it's just brutal. The first time, I mean, you stopped by my stream when I was playing it last night, and it was just brutal trying to get to it. That was the first time I legitimately like died in a mission. I failed the Gupta terrorist convoy because I took too long, but I never really died like lost all my lives in a mission until this one. You So I had to redo it, but really the strategy I found for the helicopter is that you pretty much have to, like you said, there's no real like good strategy to fight it, which I think is bad boss design because this is a it was fine for all the regular bosses because they were all on ground level with you, so you could just run around, dodge, and try your best to be good at kind of more frenetic action. In this one, you have to stop where you are. You can't run. You have to stop so that way you can aim to look up at the helicopter. There is no easy way to hit the helicopter, and it's constantly shooting at you, constantly moving, and it's honestly the biggest bullshit boss of the entire game. It's not fair. I mean, it's not
Mm.
outrageously hard, I would say, especially like you can have 20 missiles going into it. So you can take a couple of hits. It's impossible to, I would argue, unless you're somehow a speedrunner who figures something out here, I think it's impossible to fight this boss without taking a hit. I don't think it's possible to be able to beat it without taking a hit. You have to be able to take a hit. So you need some level, some health at least before you go into it. And basically, all I did was on my second playthrough of the level, or my second try on the level, I just kind of ran up to it. I planted my feet in the ground, aimed for where it was going to be, and I fired like 5 missiles in a row. And then I did that like once, like one more time, maybe two more times. I don't think I did it a total of three. I think it was like one or two times. And I took out the helicopter without barely losing any health, because at that
Mhm.
point there is like a difficulty progression to it where it starts off by just shooting some machine gun stuff at you, but then after, or machine guns at you, and as you do more damage to it, then it starts shooting missiles at you. It's not a good boss in my opinion. It's very hard. it just poorly designed. Poorly designed is what I'll
Yeah,
say. And uh, that I think that leads us to the final boss though on Stealth Boat. We'll talk about the whole level. The final boss on Stealth Boat is, I think, pretty fair overall. I don't hate it. It's a little boring, but it's not like the worst thing. There's two bosses in this level. Um you fight Carver at the very end. Why am I blanking on his henchman's name in this? What's the
Stamper.
henchman? Stamper. There we go. Herr Stamper.
Well, that's something I find weird. Like Kaufman gets a proper adjective. I mean, Satori Ishiguro gets it. Stamper never really gets a name drop in this, so I don't know if there's some sort of
No.
issues. But it's like I always assumed it was Stamper, but it's never actually confirmed, and you never meet him at any other point in the game, which
Stamper.
is weird. Because you'd think actually
Yeah.
you'd think Doctor Kaufman might be a quick fight, and then a pre-boss fight with Stamper and Hotel Atlantic might be a decent thing to do. But yeah, I always assumed it was him, but it's never explicitly mentioned to be him, which is weird because Stamper is a very iconic henchman in that film.
Yeah, and he's overall kind of Stamper's an interesting henchman character because in the grand world of Bond henchmen, he's very forgettable, but in that movie, he's very memorable. If
Yeah,
that makes sense, like
I'd
when you
agree.
compare, like he's a Red Grant wannabe is the best way I can
Oh,
describe
okay.
Stamper. And then there's a long history of Red Grant wannabes. For those who don't know, Red Grant is like the premier henchman in From Russia with Love. One of the best fight scenes in a Bond movie, just period. Even I just finished at the time of this recording, the From Russia with Love episode is going to be dropping on the bonus and the Patreon bonus feed. And one of the things we talk about with that is just like that fight scene between Bond and Red Grant is so brutal, especially for 1963. Bond fucking my co-host Erica pointed this out. Bond stomps on his back, like he's like laying like kind of like across a train bench, like a train seat, where like his feet are on the ground, his stomach, like says midsection, is on the edge of the bench, and his head and like arms are up at the top because Bond pushed him, and he stomps on his back. So like that's ideally like going right into his ribs, and it just, oh my god, what a brutal fight. Anyway, I'm
That's it.
sorry that
One thing I would mention as well, both Red Grant and Stamper, in the actual book From Russia of Love and the novelization of the film, and of Tomorrow Never Dies, they are both improved massively by the reading materials. Red Grant, I think, is a great henchman in the film. After you read the book, he is completely different. He is so much better. And it's the same with Stamper
really
in the novelization by, oh God, who's it by? Um,
Raymond Benson.
Roman Benson, that's it, yeah. Quick on the mark. Fair play.
I had him on the podcast.
Did you?
I
Wow.
did. I did.
Oh, that's impressive. I got to listen to that one. Um, but yes, they're both improved by what they are in the novels. And in the novel of Tomorrow Never Dies, Stamper is like he enjoys pain, which makes sense in the book and could have made sense in the game, but you don't see it, unfortunately.
No. And so this level, I remember you saying it on the stream too, it's definitely a lot easier than the Market District. It's you just kind of run through the level. It's also, I think, a pretty well designed level. It's a lot of interconnected pathways that are all weaving into each other. So you're like one run through one area, get a key card, then run back through the area to go to a door that was at the very beginning. And normally that would be obnoxious in other games, but the distance between all these locations isn't that far. Like you never really
Mm.
feel like you have to backtrack very far to get to the new areas. You do have to rescue Wei Lin, which does happen in the movie, so that's at least accurate to the film. Not in the same way, like they completely change it up in how you rescue her and where she's being held captive, but still, you rescue Wei Lin, and you basically you run up, you fight, you have to get the launch, you have to stop the launch of I guess I don't the missile they have, I forget, is it a nuke, I think, or is it just another one of their like machine
It's that.
thing that eats through everything?
That's it. It's the missile that eats through everything. It's
That's
another
what I
one of
thought.
those they're going to send off.
That's what I thought. So you have to stop that from in the movie, listeners. They have this weird like this thing would make no sense in real life. It's this basically looks like a torpedo, but the front of it is these large grinding gear teeth that meant to like eat through, like saw through metal, and that's how they cut through the bow of these like naval vessels. And there's absolutely no way it would do this. But
Yeah.
anyway,
It's meant to be.
um,
It's called a CVAC drill, and it's meant to be like they're reported as a torpedo, but when there's no torpedo explosion, it will add more confusion in the grand scale of things. And as you say, bullshit.
yeah, the what in the movie, the way they like steer the thing is like, all right, now go up. So like they drill in through the bottom of the boat or the whole naval vessel, and then they're like, now go up. And it's like that whole room would have to be filled with water for you to get any level of to be able to just rotate 90 degrees up, because otherwise if it's still filling with water, this thing is just floating. This thing's just like sitting. It's like a beached whale. Like it's not doing anything. It was such a weird, and I don't think water was flowing fast enough for it to fill up that room. I mean, maybe it was. I don't know how fast it would, but it just kind of funny. Anyway, that's nitpicking. But you play through the stealth boat. I actually love the end area of the stealth boat because it feels just like the movie.
Yeah,
You fight Carver, you get his key code, you stop the launch, and then you have to escape in under like 3 minutes. Or you after you kill Carver, that's when you have to stop the launch and escape in like 3 minutes. And I screwed it up because I missed the key card at first, so I had to run back to where I killed Carver, grab the key card, run back to where I was at the keypad or the input station or whatever, and stop the launch and then escape. How many seconds did I have? I think I had like 2
I
when I
think
beat the
it's
level.
about 3 or 4 seconds left. And I was watching it with you, and I knew you'd missed the key card the first time, and I didn't want to tell you straight away because I wanted you to. Watching the game yesterday, I didn't want to backseat drive, pun intended, with the entire
Uh,
thing. And it gave you the ending of that game, which was the best, which is where you're racing against time and you just make it. Because if you play that level and you know what's happening, you make it with a minute and 50 seconds to spare. The fact you had the urgency, you're running past the bosses, and you just made that cutscene.
oh yeah,
That's the best way to end that game. And you got to that bit, and you had what I felt was the definitive experience of that level. So I'm really glad it happened that way.
it was a good. Honestly, the end of that level is more exciting than the ending of the game because once you beat the game, it's like congratulations, and that's it. It's just it's like it's just a little congratulatory message. Now, before we kind of go into our final thoughts on the game, we're going to talk because I know you love the music. I don't have much to say about the music except I thought it was also good. I'm just always bad at talking about music. So if you have anything more to go into, feel free to. The music was composed by Tommy Tallarico in his studio. He's an interesting person in the games community now. He was the former president of Intellivision, the new Intellivision brand, which I'm not going to go into all that. If anyone's curious about what's going on with that, it's a mess. That's all I can say. Maybe I'll do a bonus episode on what's going on with Intellivision, but it's a mess there. But the music, he's a prolific video game composer, and the music for this game is really good. Um, I want to say real quick for my final thoughts because I want to have my guests give. I want you to get the final word. I want you to be able to put your stamp on this game. So for me, overall, it's just an average third person shooter. It's fun. It's not bad by any stretch. I would say that the controls aren't great, but to me, that's more of a symptom of age than of like, this is like bad design. I just think it's bad to me now, but at the time, I think I would have been fine with it, type of thing. So I don't knock it for its controls. The graphics are not bad. I don't really comparatively, this came out in 99. I don't think it's the best graphics for a 99 PS1 game, but they're serviceable. I still enjoy them. Um, I would say my biggest criticism of the game is that it's just generic. It's a very generic third person shooter. My biggest compliment besides the music is it's very fair. It's a very well balanced game. You get 2 lives every level guaranteed unless you pick up extras. But 2 lives every level. They get replenished at the start of each mission. That gives you plenty of health packs. You never really feel overwhelmed for the most part. I think in general, the game might be a tad too easy, just a smidge, but not by much. And I don't even really consider that a problem because I like easier games, but I do think in general, like, it is a little bit too easy. But I think the balancing of difficulty is re- maybe not the balance, because it does ramp up with Saigon. So like the balance may not be great because it's not this gradual steady curve. It's like it goes up a little bit, and then skyrockets with Saigon and then comes back down. Um, what I will say though is it's just really well, like, it's fair. I can't put it any more than that. Like, I never felt once like when I died or when I screwed up that it was because of the game. It was because of me. It's because I screwed something up. I took too long on the convoy mission. I was I didn't do well like fighting a helicopter. Like, yeah, the mechanics were a little hard, but like that's just, it's your job as the player to learn the mechanics. If I do think the helicopter fight was bullshit, but at the same time, it's still like I was able to beat it on the second try. So how bullshit really was it? So it's a fair game. I overall, it was fun to play. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to someone now if you're going back trying to do it for the first time. But if you can put your mindset in someone from 19 who played it in the early 2000s slash late 90s, and if you're able to do that and you like that style of game, I think you'd have a good time with it. I think it is a very competent game from 1999. I just don't know if it holds up as well now to modern sensibilities. Like GoldenEye holds up, in my opinion, better to modern sensibilities than this does, and GoldenEye does not hold up well at all to modern sensibilities. But anyway, sorry, I kind of gave a little mixture of like likes and dislikes. Overall, I still really enjoy this game. So with all my criticisms out there, I still really liked it. I actually would play it probably again. But it still has a lot of problems in terms of the balance. And the controls are a little hard for me now, but that's not a knock on the game. That's just that's me being used to more modern controls. I'm reiterating all the same shit over again. So before I continue to ramble, Chris, I want to hear from you. Like, what are your thoughts? How, like, now that we've gone through this mission by mission and we've kind of talked about different aspects, what are your thoughts and overall perception of this game now?
It's very difficult to give an overall opinion because I'm playing this as two different people. I'm playing this as a video game fan. I'm also playing it as a James Bond fan. To look at it as a video game fan, yes, it's dated quite poorly. Your comment about it being generic, I would completely agree with. And it's not much of an outstanding game. I mean, based against what it was against at the time, it was pretty good, I'd say. As a James Bond fan, I think this game is really bloody fantastic. Just to
Mm-hmm.
start off with the soundtrack, Tommy Tallarico, of very dubious nature, as we discussed, he nailed this. And
Mm-hmm.
bizarrely, James Bond is so reliant on the motifs and that sort of thing that actually, when it pulls through well, it can alter the experience massively. And if you're a Bond fan and you listen to Outpost, it sounds right. If you listen to Media Tower, if you listen to PPK Detonate, it really brings off the right vibe, especially what David Arnold was putting off at the time. And even the theme where you get an extra life, the Bwadam, that's actually taken from the film. They compressed that and actually used that from the beginning of Bond arriving at Hamburg.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
yeah, and as a Bond game, it's it's brilliant. I think it's a tremendously good Bond game. I think it brings off enough of the film that actually you can relate to the film and you can feel like you're playing Bond. You are wearing a tuxedo or a suit or something that works the entire time that feels like it. You've got the iconic weaponry. You've got the PPK or the PP9. I think P99, no PP9 they call it in this, and the P2K later on. You've got a whole host of gadgets. I mean, you've got the cufflinks, which have a separate animation. You've got the ability, as I said before, the ability to shoot somebody and they fall into the printing press. There's so much to love about it as a Bond fan, and it really pains me to say that all the things I love about this game aren't going to be relevant to people who don't like James Bond. Because if you take that
Yeah.
away, it's not got much, which is a real shame. But then again, you got to think when they're making a James Bond game, yes, they're going to be looking for any audience they can, but specifically, it's got to speak to a James Bond audience. And I think this game did it much better than 007 Legends, GoldenEye Rogue Agent. I think to a degree
Yeah.
better than Bloodstone. I think this is a better James Bond game than Bloodstone, even though Bloodstone is a far
Ooh,
superior game.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't even know if I agree with that with Rogue Agent. I actually think Rogue Agent's fun.
Oh, well, that's going to be a conversation at some point. But I don't know what it is. It's difficult to speak through nostalgia because the one thing that resides with me is waking up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday, which is when I was allowed to play. I wasn't allowed to play video games before 8 o'clock on a Saturday. Waking up, rushing downstairs, putting that disc in, seeing that gun barrel, playing these levels on repeat. It is personally a very important game to me. And so I can't give a proper full review without being biased, which is a shame, but I'm also sure that's why
No,
you
there's
asked me on this
nothing wrong with
podcast in
that.
the first place.
We are
Um,
not we are not journalists. You're allowed to give your completely biased take on a game.
yeah. And for me, from a completely biased take, I bloody love this. This is my second favorite Bond game behind GoldenEye.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's many games that do it better. GoldenEye Reloaded, I think, is an absolute blast. Bloodstone is incredible. Nightfire is fantastic. But for me, yeah, it's GoldenEye, then Tomorrow Never Dies. And as far as I'm aware, I can't imagine how that's ever going to change. I bloody love this game.
That's nostalgia hits strong, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's one of those things that I'm glad I had you on for this episode because I can't think of I don't so I was telling you off mic, I have a buddy of mine that Justin, who's been on the show a bunch of times. We were doing this like kind of impromptu James Bond series on the show, not about the movies, but about all the games. I don't think, and this is no shade thrown at Justin, I don't think he would have been a good guest for this episode because this is your second favorite Bond game. I don't think I'll ever meet someone, and this is not an insult to you or to Tomorrow Never Dies the game, but I don't think I'll ever meet someone who puts this that high in that high esteem. So I'm happy to have you on for this episode because you this was a lot of fun. I this was a lot of fun to break down this level by level. Listeners, I know this is a bizarrely specific breakdown for a game that probably a lot of you have never even touched or heard of. So it is I'm very happy to have you on the show for this. We should start wrapping this up though. I think that's a good place to leave our final thoughts. So, Chris, where can the good people find you on social media? Is there anything you would like to promote?
You can find me on Instagram as a British Bond addict. I'm somebody who just enjoys posting about James Bond. That's kind of basically it. I'm not going to promote any other little things because this is what I'm here for. So I appreciate the opportunity, though. And I must say thank you so much because this is, as I said, a game that means so much to me. This is the most I've ever talked about it. And it's been actually a really wonderful experience just to go through those emotions again, to talk about it in detail. And yeah, I've got a huge smile on my face and I'm really going to remember this. So thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you for coming on. And of course, as usual for me, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to email me, you can email me stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can do so in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use, because that helps more people find the show. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For $1 a month, you'll get all the episodes a few days earlier at a higher bit rate, as well as access to a patron exclusive Discord. For $4 a month, you'll get everything that I mentioned in the $1 tier, plus 2 bonus mini episodes every month. And then for $5 a month, you'll get everything already in the $1 and $4 tiers, plus the exclusive Still Bonding podcast that I do with my friend Erica Gwynn from the Monster Madness show. So if any of that interests you, patreon.com/stillloadingpod, and your support is very much appreciated. But if your funds are limited, please consider donating to the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. And that is all I have for you today. That is a full episode of Tomorrow Never Dying, and I am so happy that I got to share this with all of you. And Chris, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute blast.
That will do it for this week. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you all next time.